Hi, welcome to entrepreneur number 9. You've stayed with us for a while, haven't you? If you've got this far. Actually, we've only got one more to go. I like this particular session because it's all about goal setting. I don't know whether you've ever thought about it or do it, but I like the whole subject. But first of all, let's recap as to where we've been. So that's been the journey so far, and here we are today. Right, today, setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. We should not focus again on what we're up against, but there are all sorts of problems in setting goals, but we ignore those and focus on the goal. A goal, what is a goal? A goal is a dream with a deadline. The problem is that positive goal-setting thinkers will always seem crazy to other people who think very conventionally. But, and I will say this a few times today, goal setting is a bit like a magnet. I don't really understand it, but if you don't set goals, you don't go anywhere. When you set goals, it draws that goal that you set towards you. Why? I don't know. Goals, especially when you achieve them, should be celebrated. Why set goals? Well, it's a good question. As I've said already, setting goals is like the first step in turning that which can't be seen into that which can be seen. We've talked about goal setting before, and in today's culture, sometimes that's a little bit of a strange thinking, partly because of technology and partly because we live in today's world, particularly in the West, in a culture that wants everything right now. Instant coffee, instant tea, instant credit, instant everything. So we don't think in terms of setting goals. Goal setting presupposes hard work, patience, and a clear focus. The problem is that in our world, we do things instantly. I remember somebody organising a conference once, and they came to me and said, shall I cancel it because only 9 people have booked in? I said, have you had to pay a deposit? Yes, I've had to pay, and I will be fined if we don't take it. So I said, you might as well take it for the 9. How many people does it hold? And they said the conference centre holds 60. Actually, I went to the conference, 92 turned up, many of them sleeping on the floor. And I said, why didn't you book in? Oh, well, you knew I would come. No, I didn't. So there's a strange thing about our current culture that because we do things instantly, and if you're a planner, sometimes that's very, very hard because you're trying to book in advance and nobody's telling you. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, planning, goal setting and understanding the first steps towards fixing your sights on a target that you've set apart will set you apart from the crowd. Such planning is essential, and what the Chinese say is very true. The longest journey always starts with the first step. What am I going to do? That's what I want to get to in, I don't know, 5 years' time. But tomorrow I have to do this because that is taking me to where I'm going in 5 years' time. And that's how goal setting works. So Venus Williams, she said, I don't focus on what I'm up against, I focus on my goals and I ignore the rest. Good advice. One day when I was in college, I attended a lecture done by the director of Coverdale Publishing House, and he is the guy that brought out in the UK the first ever what's called the Living Bible, and he was the managing director. The whole lecture was all about setting goals, and I remember sitting there. Yeah, his name was Hill Davis, Jack Hill Davis. I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, well, there's something here that is very valuable. And I decided there and then, as I sat in that room listening to him talk, I am going to make this part of my life. And I remember coming out of college and sitting down and writing my goals for the next 5 years. People with clear written goals accomplish far more in a shorter period of time than people without them can ever imagine. Isn't that interesting? A goal is a dream with a deadline. So this is my dream. I'm putting it down on paper. These are the first steps. I'm going to achieve it. So for me, my life goals were made up of immediate things that I needed to do. They were made up of short-term goals. So within the next 6 months, a year, to reach that long-term goal, I need to do these things because that will take me on the journey. And the long-term goal will be in 5 years' time. And on a yearly basis, I would sit down and review those goals and say, maybe I ate too much cheese when I put that down. That's a silly idea. Or, yes, we've got there. That's been accomplished. And I need to perhaps adjust things. But in reality, it helped me to think through the future. Some things don't work and some plans don't come to fruition. But if you've got no plans and no goals, it won't work. So when I moved to London, and I should give things away here, that was in 1974, before some of you were born, I guess. I was leading 2 congregations of churches, and in those days, the churches were organised by a thing called a diagnate. I'm not sure whether I would sort of still live with that kind of thing nowadays, but I'm not there anymore. But it worked to a certain extent. We had regular board meetings, and in those board meetings, what was really interesting is that I think they'd sort of sussed me and they said, "You're planning to take us and these situations to another place." "Yes, I am." "Well, please tell us where we're going." I said, "I don't really want to do that in this meeting because if I do, you would be very afraid and you would say it can't be done." They said, no, tell us. So unwisely, I shared my 5-year plan with them. And of course, the response I got was, "That's ridiculous. You can't possibly do that. Will never happen." They all went mad. They were angry. They told me how insane I was. It was impossible. And we achieved them all within the 5 years. But that's people, isn't it? Positive, go-getting thinkers will always seem crazy to those who think conventionally. Never apologise for seeing past people's ordinary comfort zone and ordinary thinking. Most companies are made up of different personality types. So there's all sorts of different people around. The fact is, one of the hardest things for entrepreneurials is to say why, because there are more people, why they're going there, or why their goal is this, or why they're going there, because there are more, this is an Adrian phrase, I think, there are more bucket of cold water people than there are possibility people. So what do I mean by cold bucket of water people? Well, you come out with this grand idea, this is your goal, they get a bucket of cold water and they sling it over your head and say, that can't be done. So there are more of those people out there than there are those who think possibly. It can be done, it's mad, it's stupid. I've often said in my lifetime, fortunately, I'm too stupid to know that certain things couldn't be done, but I already did it because I was too stupid to know that it couldn't be done. Stay away from negative people. They have a problem for every solution. Have you noticed that some people are like that? You say, they come to you with a problem and you say, well, if you do so, oh yes, but then that will happen and I won't be able to. Okay, well, here's an answer. So for every answer, they have another problem. Problem thinkers. Many of us are like that, but actually, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you can't be like that. Now, I think this is very funny, but I've got a list coming up in a second of comments made by clever, expert people in their field, and you will see that there are more negatives than there are positives. Many quotes are made of the things that make people mad and people thought were possible were things that we now take for granted. For example, here, let's have a look at the list. Radio has no future. Heavier than air flying machines are impossible. X-rays will prove to be a hoax. He was a British scientist in 1859. How about that? How about this one? It will be years, but not in my time, before a woman will become Prime Minister. Margaret Thatcher said that in 1974. These aren't made up, these are real. There is not the slightest indication that nuclear energy will ever be obtainable. It must mean that the atom would have to be shattered at will. Who said that? Albert Einstein in 1932. Oh, how about this one? Who the hell wants to hear actors talk? H.M. Warner of Warner Brothers in 1927. Here's another one. So, well, we've got some more in a minute. The difficulty for an entrepreneur is that to accomplish most things, he or she must persuade other people to come with them. They have got to get past the negatives, and there are usually lots of them. When you have to prove the value of your ideas by persuading other people to pay for them, it clears out an awful lot of woolly thinking. It's one of the hardest things to do. It's about having your goal, having your idea, setting the parameters of how you're going to get there, but then, and it's probably the most difficult thing in the world, is to persuade other people to come with you, because usually you can't get there by yourself. Moses, go back to the Bible for a moment, he could not take the land he saw because the 10 out of the 12 people were so negative that the other people would not go with him. He never got there. So he had a dream, he had a vision, he'd taken steps, he was on the way, but he never got there. Why did he not get there? Because he failed to be able to take the other people with him. So they never actually, the land had been promised, but he never got there. History is tragically littered with such lost possibilities. However, having said that we need to take people with us, the reality is that history shows that one person can make a difference, even about bad people. These are some of the people that have made history. That lady in the middle, Mother Teresa, I was in a restaurant the other night, got talking to the guy. It was an Indian restaurant, and I don't know how we even got onto the subject. This is just 2 or 3 days ago. He said, "Oh, I live next door to Mother Teresa." He said, "And my uncle was her driver. And," he said, "when she died, I handled all the crowds at her funeral." It was an interesting conversation. It's one of those, wow, it's a small world type feeling. So even bad things, if you think of the world in which you live in and I live in today, much of it was created badly by Hitler. So even bad things can be changed by one person. So you think of what Hitler unfortunately did in World War II, and you realise actually one person can change the world, and not always for the better. So if you think that you're too small to do something, my suggestion is, and you're only one individual, my suggestion is that you spend one night in a room by yourself with a mosquito, which is very small, and ask yourself, can one little thing make a difference? Okay, I'm going back right to the beginning, which I said about magnets. And I said, goals are like magnets. They pull things towards you. And the stronger they are, the more purposeful they are. The bigger they are, the more unique they are, the stronger the pull. And as I said right at the beginning, I don't understand why it works like that. I just know it does. So goals draw things to you. My advice is that you should set those goals, put them down on paper, look at where you're aiming for, and go there. Goals are like magnets. They attract things that make them come true. Unless you're like the farmer. There was a farmer who had a big barn, and on the barn was all sorts of boards where you shoot at, and everyone had a hole in the middle, a bullseye. And somebody came to him and said, "How on earth do you hit those so many balls? You must be a crack shot." No, he said, "I just shoot my gun at the barn." And he said, then where the hole is, I paint the target around the hole. And that way, I'm sure that I hit it every single time. Well, you could do it that way if you want to. If you become a goal setter, you should also become a goal celebrator. My friend Gerald Coates said we should celebrate all our small successes. I agree with that. I remember my wife made me laugh. We're paying, like most of you, paying your rent or your mortgage. She used to say to me, every time I pay the mortgage each month, she said, I go and celebrate that I've made another month. So I sit down and award myself a cup of coffee and a celebration. I sit there thinking, I'm celebrating the fact that I've paid this month's mortgage. So celebrate your small successes, never mind your big ones. We live in a world where there's a great deal of problems and sadness. However, ultimately the God I serve is what I call a party God. He is a celebrating God. If you read the Bible, one of the things that, as people miss it, I think, is that at the end of the universe, if you like, or the end of the age, from a Bible scripture point of view, what is it that happens? Actually, what happens is a party. It's a big banquet. Celebrate success. Set goals, achieve them, and celebrate them. I hope today has persuaded you to be a goal setter.